This week, there's a massive summit going on called the Summit for Democracy, where 110 countries are gathering to discuss the state of global democracy and how to improve it. Or at least that's what they're saying. The summit is being convened by the US, which makes perfect sense because, as we all know, the core tenet of democracy is getting to vote every 2 or 4 years for who will oppress us for the next 2 or 4 years. Not to mention suppressing protests and voting rights in the black community, mass incarceration, and the unquestionable right of corporations to purchase the loyalty of politicians, the media, and police. Obviously, the summit isn't really about democracy. So what is it about? It's actually just the latest political stunt aimed at China. You see, as more and more countries open diplomatic relations with China and expand trade with China, countries realize that there are actually a lot of advantages to working with China. Donald Trump attempted to contain China's rise by threatening to enact sanctions or tariffs on any country that decided to trade with China, even US allies. This strategy backfired though because it made those countries feel the need to be more independent of the US. Biden's China containment policy is to share a little bit of power with this coalition of democracies on the condition that they don't do business with China. This would also give the continuation of US global hegemony an air of legitimacy because hey, it's not the US forcing this imperialist system on the world. It's all these other countries too. So this summit is just a manifestation of this larger strategy. How do we know? Just take a look at who's invited and more importantly, who isn't invited. On the invite list, you have notoriously democratic countries like Colombia, where protests against the government's starvation policies have been met with tear gas and rubber bullets. Or how about apartheid Israel, which enforces legal race-based segregation against the indigenous people of that land? Well, 110 countries have been invited, 83 countries haven't. Those 83 happen to include all the countries the US regularly tries to destabilize and overthrow. Also, how exactly can you call this a summit for democracy if half the world isn't included? It's obvious that this is all an attempt to use the language of democracy to wage war against countries that are independent of US domination. It's worth noting that Venezuela and Cuba will be holding counter summits this week, where they'll speak against the US vision of world domination. If the US actually wanted to participate in a genuine global discussion about democracy, they could have gone to the UN. But whenever the United Nations refuses to act as a tool for US foreign policy, the US has to find other venues. The US can't control the outcome of the United Nations, so in classic American fashion, the US has decided that if the rules of the game don't fit their desired outcome, they're going to create their own.